Here's part one of your story in 800 words. Written in third person with simple English and no headings. Emma Watson was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. After working late at her local charity office, she stopped at Wilson's Corner, shop just 2 streets from her small flat. The evening air felt crisp against her face as she selected a few items: bread, milk, and some chocolate biscuits as a small treat after her long day. As office manager for the Community Aid Foundation, Emma spent her days helping those in need. At 34, she had built a respectable career working with disadvantaged families. What she loved most was seeing the direct impact of their programs: children receiving proper school supplies, elderly folks getting regular hot meals, and families finding stable housing. Emma paid for her groceries, exchanging pleasant words with old Mr. Wilson, who had owned the shop for nearly 40 years. She stepped outside, plastic bag in hand, looking forward to a quiet evening with a cup of tea and perhaps catching up on her favorite television program. The screech of tires cut through the peaceful evening. 3 police cars surrounded the area, their blue lights casting eerie shadows across the street. Before Emma could process what was happening, officers poured from the vehicles, some with weapons drawn. "On the ground, now!" a loud voice commanded. Emma stood frozen, the shopping bag dangling from her fingers. Surely they weren't speaking to her. "I said on the ground. Hands where we can see them." Her heart hammered against her ribs as understanding dawned. They were indeed speaking to her. With trembling hands, she carefully placed her groceries on the pavement and followed their instructions, lowering herself to the cold concrete. "There must be some mistake," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "My name is Emma Watson. I work at the Community Aid Foundation just down on Park Street." An officer approached cautiously, handcuffs ready. "You match the description of a suspect in an armed robbery at the petrol station on Richmond Road. Dark hair, red coat, approximately 5'6". The cold metal of handcuffs bit into Emma's wrists as the officer secured them behind her back. She noticed several bystanders had stopped to watch, some with phones raised, recording the scene. Embarrassment burned through her as she was helped to her feet and led toward a waiting police car. Emma's mind raced to her husband, Robert. As National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, he was currently in a confidential meeting discussing matters of international importance. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her husband worked to protect the nation, she couldn't even walk home from the shop without being mistaken for a criminal. "Please," she tried again, maintaining her composure despite the growing fear. "This is a mistake. I'm entitled to a phone call. My husband—" "You'll get your call at the station," the officer interrupted, guiding her into the back seat of the police car. "Everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but we need to follow procedure." The journey to the police station took only minutes, but to Emma it felt like hours. Through the window she watched familiar streets pass by. The bakery where she bought fresh bread on Saturdays, the library where she volunteered reading to children, the park where she and Robert walked their dog Barney on Sunday mornings. How quickly ordinary life could be upended. At the station, Emma was photographed, fingerprinted, and led to a small interview room with gray walls and a simple table with 3 chairs. An officer took her personal belongings, her handbag, keys, and mobile phone, placing them in a plastic container. "I need to call my husband," Emma said firmly. "It's my right." "All in good time," replied the desk sergeant without looking up from his paperwork. "The detective will be with you shortly." Left alone in the room, Emma tried to steady her breathing. She thought of all the people she had helped through the charity, who had faced similar situations, many without the advantages she had of education, resources, and connections. If this was frightening for her, how much worse must it be for them? The door opened and a tired-looking detective entered carrying a thin folder. "Mrs. Watson, I'm Detective Clark. I understand you claim to have been at work today until what time exactly?" "I don't claim anything," Emma replied with quiet dignity. "I was at the Community Aid Foundation office until 6:30 this evening. My colleagues can verify that, as can our security system." Detective Clark made some notes. "And can anyone confirm your movements after leaving work?" Emma thought of Robert, who at this very moment had no idea what was happening to his wife. The meeting he was in was scheduled to last hours yet. No one knew where she was. No one was coming to help her. The end in the small interview room. Emma sat with her back straight despite her growing anxiety. 2 hours had passed since her arrest, and she still hadn't been allowed to make her phone call. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the bare walls. Detective Clark returned with a female officer. "Mrs. Watson, this is Officer Bennett. She'll be sitting in on our conversation." Officer Bennett had kind eyes. That contrasted with her stiff posture. She nodded to Emma before taking a seat in the corner. "Let's go through this again," Detective Clark said, flipping open his notepad. "You say you were at work until 6:30, then went directly to Wilson's shop." "That's correct," Emma replied, fighting to keep her voice level. "As I've explained 3 times now. The robbery took place at 6:15. The witness described someone of your build with your hair color wearing a similar coat." Emma shook her head. "I was in a meeting with our donors until 6:25. There were 6 other people present." Detective Clark studied her face. "We're checking your story. Meanwhile, would you consent to being part of an identity parade? If you're innocent as you claim, you have nothing to worry about." "I know my rights," Emma said firmly. "I want my phone call first." A flicker of annoyance crossed the detective's face. "Very well." When he left, Officer Bennett moved closer. "First time being arrested?" Emma nodded, tears threatening despite her best efforts. "Try not to worry too much," Officer Bennett said quietly. "These mix-ups happen more often than you'd think." Emma studied the officer. "Do they? Or do some people just fit a certain profile that makes them more likely to be stopped?" Officer Bennett's eyes widened slightly, but before she could respond, the door opened again. "Your call," Detective Clark said, holding the door. At the desk, Emma's fingers trembled as she dialed Robert's private number. It went straight to voicemail. He was still in his meeting. She tried their home number next, reaching their neighbor, Mrs. Taylor, who sometimes fed their dog when they worked late. "Mrs. Taylor, it's Emma. I need you to get an urgent message to Robert when he comes home. Tell him I've been arrested. There's been a mistake. I'm at Blackwood Police Station." Back in the interview room, time crawled by. Emma thought about the families she worked with at the foundation. How many of them had experienced similar situations without anyone to call, without knowledge of their rights. Meanwhile, across town, Robert Watson was just emerging from his 4-hour security briefing. As National Security Advisor, his days were filled with confidential matters of state security, terrorist threats, and international diplomacy. He checked his phone, surprised to see he had 7 missed calls. 3 from an unknown number and 4 from Mrs. Taylor. His heart sank as he listened to the increasingly worried messages from their elderly neighbor. By the final message, Mrs. Taylor was nearly in tears. "Robert, dear, Emma's been arrested. She says it's all a mistake. She's at Blackwood Station. Please call me when you get this." Robert immediately called his driver. "Change of plans, James. We need to go to Blackwood Police Station right away." During the drive, Robert made several calls. The first was to James Mills, the Home Secretary, an old university friend. The second was to their family solicitor. At the police station, the desk sergeant looked up as Robert entered, flanked by his security detail and the impeccably dressed solicitor. "I'm here to see my wife, Emma Watson," Robert said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The sergeant blinked in surprise. "And you are?" "Robert Watson, National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. My wife was brought here approximately 3 hours ago in connection with a robbery she could not possibly have committed." The sergeant's face paled. "Sir, I wasn't aware." "That's precisely the problem," Robert interrupted. "You weren't aware who she was, so proper procedure wasn't followed. She was denied her phone call for over 2 hours. I want to see her immediately, and I want to speak with the officer in charge." The station erupted into activity. Detective Clark appeared, looking considerably less confident than he had in the interview room. "Mr. Watson, I assure you we've been following standard procedure for all suspects. My wife is not a suspect, Robert said evenly. She is an innocent woman who has been detained without cause. Now, where is she? In the interview room, Emma looked up as the door opened. The relief that flooded her face when she saw Robert was quickly replaced by determination. As he embraced her, she whispered, "This isn't just about me. This happens to people every day who don't have someone like you to help them." Robert nodded solemnly. "I know, and that's going to change, starting today." The end. The news of Emma Watson's arrest spread quickly through the police station. Inspector Paul Johnson, the station's highest-ranking officer, emerged from his office with a worried expression. He had just received a call from the commissioner himself. This was quickly becoming a public relations nightmare. "Mr. Watson," Inspector Johnson said, extending his hand to Robert, "I want to personally apologize for this unfortunate incident. We've confirmed with Mrs. Watson's workplace that she was indeed in a meeting during the time of the robbery." Robert shook the offered hand firmly, but his expression remained serious. "Thank you, Inspector, but an apology to my wife would be more appropriate." Inspector Johnson turned to Emma. "Mrs. Watson, I sincerely apologize for the distress we've caused you." Emma nodded, accepting the apology, but her mind was elsewhere. During those hours in the interview room, she had time to think. Her treatment, while unpleasant, was likely better than most people in similar situations received. She had education, resources, and now, powerful connections fighting for her. Many others were not so fortunate. The witness has now clarified their statement. Inspector Johnson continued. "The person they saw was wearing a red coat similar to yours, but was much younger and had different features. You're free to go, of course." As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed Officer Bennett watching from across the room. The young officer approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Watson, I wanted to say something before you go." Officer Bennett said quietly, "What you said earlier about some people fitting a certain profile, it made me think. I joined the force to help people, but sometimes the system doesn't work the way it should." Emma studied the officer's honest face. "Maybe you could be part of changing that system." Outside the station, reporters had already gathered. Someone had tipped them off about the National Security Advisor's presence at the police station, and the story was too good to ignore. "Robert," Emma said, gripping his arm as they faced the flashing cameras, "we need to use this." Robert looked at his wife questioningly. "This happened to me for a few hours," Emma explained. "But it happens to countless others every day, and they don't have your influence or connections. We can't just go home and forget this happened." Robert nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're right." They stopped before the reporters. Robert raised his hand for silence. "My wife was wrongfully detained today," he began, his voice clear and steady. "The police have acknowledged their mistake and she has been released without charge. While we appreciate the apology, we cannot ignore that this incident highlights a larger issue within our justice system." Emma stepped forward. "I was lucky. I had resources and connections that many others don't have. But justice shouldn't depend on who you know or who you're married to." The reporters called out questions, but Emma continued. "In my work at the Community Aid Foundation, I've heard too many similar stories that didn't end with a prompt release and an apology." That night, the Watsons sat in their comfortable living room, the events of the day playing on every news channel. Their phone hadn't stopped ringing, calls from friends, family, journalists, and even the Prime Minister's office. "They're calling it the Watson incident," Robert said, turning down the volume on the television. "The commissioner has ordered a full review of arrest procedures." Emma sipped her tea thoughtfully. "It's not enough." "What do you mean?" "One review, one news cycle, then everyone moves on," Emma explained. "We need something more permanent." Robert watched his wife, seeing the determination in her eyes. Throughout their 15 years of marriage, he had always admired her compassion, but now he was seeing a steely resolve that matched his own. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Emma set down her cup. "I'm thinking about starting a foundation, one focused specifically on legal representation for those wrongfully detained. Using my experience in the charity sector and your connections, in government we could make real change." Robert considered this. "It would mean putting ourselves in the public eye even more. Are you prepared for that?" Emma thought about the cold interview room, the hours of uncertainty, the fear. Then she thought about all the people who faced worse treatment with no one to help them. "Yes," she said firmly. "I've never been more certain of anything." Robert reached for her hand. "Then we'll do it together." As night fell over the city, Emma and Robert Watson began planning what would soon become the Justice for All Foundation, unaware of just how far-reaching its impact would be. The end 3 months after Emma's wrongful arrest, the Justice for All Foundation was taking shape. Emma and Robert had converted the ground floor of an old Victorian building into a welcoming office space. Large windows let in plenty of light, and comfortable chairs filled the waiting area. The walls were painted a soft blue to create a calm atmosphere for visitors who often arrived distressed and worried. Emma had left her job at the Community Aid Foundation to run the new organization full-time. Using their savings and donations from friends, they had hired a small team: 2 solicitors, a paralegal, and a receptionist named Mary. Mary was a grandmotherly woman with silver hair and a warm smile who made everyone feel at ease the moment they walked through the door. Today was particularly busy. Emma checked her watch as she finished a phone call. Their first major case was going to court tomorrow: a young man named Jack who had been held for 30 hours despite having proof he was elsewhere when the crime occurred. "Emma, there's someone here to see you," Mary called from the reception area. "Says she's not here about a case but would like a word." Emma stepped out of her office, surprised to see Officer Bennett from the police station. The young officer was not in uniform today and looked nervous. "Officer Bennett, this is unexpected," Emma said, extending her hand. "Please, call me Laura," the officer replied. "I'm not here officially. I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day, and I've been following the work you're doing." Emma invited Laura into her office and offered her tea. "The truth is," Laura began, "I've been keeping a record of cases I thought were handled badly. People arrested with flimsy evidence, denied proper procedure, or treated more harshly than circumstances warranted." She pulled a notebook from her bag. "I wasn't sure what to do with this information until I read about your foundation." Emma leafed through the notebook, her eyes widening at the detailed accounts. This was exactly the kind of inside information they needed, but had been struggling to obtain. "Why are you showing me this?" Emma asked. "This could put your job at risk." Laura looked down at her hands. "My grandfather was a police officer. He always said the job was about protecting people, all people. Lately, I feel like we're failing at that." She looked up, meeting Emma's eyes. "I want to help make things right." That evening, Emma shared Laura's visit with Robert as they walked their dog, Barney, through the park near their home. "She's taking a huge risk," Robert said, watching Barney chase a squirrel. "Whistleblowers aren't always treated kindly." "I know," Emma agreed. "But with her information, we can identify patterns. It's not just about individual cases anymore. We can push for systematic change." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of change, I had an interesting conversation with the Home Secretary today. There's support for a parliamentary committee to review arrest procedures nationwide." Emma smiled. "That's exactly what we need: change from within the system and pressure from outside." As they turned toward home, Emma's phone rang. It was Mary, sounding excited. "Emma, you won't believe who just called. The BBC wants to interview you about the foundation in Jack's case. They're doing a special report on justice reform." The next morning, Emma sat nervously in the BBC studio, adjusting her microphone. The interview would be broadcast live on the morning news program watched by millions. She thought of all the people counting on her: Jack, whose case would be heard that afternoon; Laura, who had risked her career; and the countless others who had faced injustice without anyone to speak for them. "We're on in 30 seconds, the producer called. Emma took a deep breath. 6 months ago, she had been a charity worker leading a quiet life. Now she was becoming the public face of a movement for change. The red light on the camera blinked on. "Today we're joined by Emma Watson, founder of the Justice for All Foundation," the presenter began. "Emma, your organization began after your own experience of wrongful arrest. Can you tell us about that?" Emma looked directly into the camera, thinking of all the people who needed someone to speak for them. Her voice was clear and confident as she began to tell her story. The end-on year after the founding of the Justice for All Foundation, Emma stood in the community center that now housed their expanded offices. What had begun as a small operation had grown beyond her wildest expectations. The foundation now employed 15 people and had helped over 200 individuals who had been wrongfully detained. Today was special. They were celebrating their first anniversary with an open house for the community. The main hall was filled with people from all walks of life: former clients, donors, community leaders, and even several police officers. Emma watched as Robert chatted with the police commissioner. Their relationship had been tense at first, but over months of working together on reform initiatives, they had developed a cautious respect. The commissioner had recently implemented new training programs based on the foundation's recommendations. Laura Bennett, who had left the police force to work full-time for the foundation, was showing visitors their new educational materials. After providing her notebook of cases, Laura had become invaluable to their work, offering insider knowledge of police procedures and helping design better approaches. Jack, their first major case, was there too. After being cleared of all charges, he had volunteered to speak at schools about knowing your rights. His friendly manner and personal story made a powerful impact on young people. "Quite a turnout," said a voice behind Emma. She turned to see Inspector Johnson, who had apologized to her that day at the police station. "Inspector Johnson, I'm glad you could come," Emma said, genuinely pleased to see him. "Paul, please," he corrected with a small smile. "I'm not here officially today. I wanted to see what you've accomplished." They walked together through the exhibition where photos and stories of people they had helped lined the walls. For many visitors, it was their first time seeing the human faces behind the statistics. "You know," Paul said thoughtfully, "when you were first arrested, many of us at the station were worried about our careers. We expected complaints, maybe even lawsuits. Nobody expected this." He gestured around them. Emma nodded. "Blame doesn't create change. Working together does." They stopped before a large display showing their newest initiative, a pilot program where community members would accompany police officers on patrols in certain neighborhoods, building trust and understanding on both sides. "I've signed up for the pilot," Paul said. "Many of my officers have too." Emma felt a surge of hope. This was exactly what they had been working toward, not just helping individuals after wrongs had occurred, but preventing those wrongs in the first place. Mary, their receptionist, approached with an elderly gentleman. "Emma, this is Mr. Thomas. He's come all the way from Manchester to speak with you." Mr. Thomas had tears in his eyes as he took Emma's hand. "My grandson was helped by your foundation last month. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like you were. Before you came along, our family didn't know where to turn." As Emma listened to Mr. Thomas's story, she noticed Robert watching her from across the room. He gave her a small, proud smile. This past year had not been easy for either of them. Robert had faced criticism from some government colleagues who felt he was being disloyal by supporting the foundation's push for reform. Emma had worked endless hours, sometimes doubting whether they were making any real difference. But moments like this made it all worthwhile. Later that evening, when the last visitors had gone, Emma and Robert walked hand in hand through the quiet office. Photos of success stories covered one wall, faces of people whose lives had been changed by their work. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been arrested that day?" Robert asked. Emma considered the question. "I was lucky," she said finally. "I had resources, I knew my rights. But that day showed me how easily justice can fail, even for someone with every advantage. It made me see how much harder it must be for those without those advantages." Robert squeezed her hand. "You've built something amazing here." "We've built it," Emma corrected him. "And we're just getting started." As they turned off the lights and locked up, Emma thought about all the people who had come together to create change. Laura with her courage to speak up, Jack with his willingness to share his story, Inspector Johnson with his openness to new ideas, and countless others who believed in a better system. What had begun as a personal injustice had grown into a movement that was slowly, steadily, making the world a fairer place. There was still much work to be done, but for the first time, Emma truly believed it was possible. The end.